This week's episode is brought to you by Julva. Julva is a product I use all the time. It is a wonderful, safe cream created by my friend, gynecologist, Dr. Anna Kabeka. It is formulated specifically for a healthy vulva. This is for your delicate feminine parts. It is a wonderful, non-toxic, healing cream that soothes, repairs, and rejuvenates the feminine you. Dr. Anna is a dear friend. I tested out this product several years ago, and I've been using it ever since. I told her she should call it the female Viagra. It's helpful for dryness. It's helpful for delicate, sensitive skin. Women have been using it who have urinary incontinence, painful intercourse due to vaginal dryness, and difficulty with arousal or orgasm. Julva cream is one of my absolute favorite products. You can get it with a 60-day money-back guarantee by going to herrulesradio.com/shop. Try Julva. Welcome back to Her Rules Radio. This is Alexandra Jameson, your hostess, your mentor in your phone or on your podcast. Great to have you back. This is the show for women and a few cool dudes who want to learn how to live life by their own rules. And today, of course, I have my brand spanking new sidekick co-host, Eric Rubin. Eric, how you doing?
I'm spanking new. I'm good. Thanks.
So we're going to talk about heartache today. I know. Oh. But we're also going to talk about how to fix a broken heart. We've got an awesome interview with Winch coming up on his book, How to Fix a Broken Heart. But Eric, I know that you've had some heartbreak in your life.
I've experienced heartache and heartbreak.
Yeah.
I've had people cheat on me.
Me too.
Betrayal is probably the top heartbreaky thing from my point of view.
Who was your first heartbreak?
Oh my God, I think when I realized I wasn't going to ever have Barbara Eden. No, you meant real heartbreak. I think my college girlfriend broke my heart. Mm-hmm. She was with one of my fraternity brothers one night.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was not good.
Oh, wow.
I found her shoes outside his room.
Oh, that's tough.
That's
like straight out of a rom-com.
They're not so much the com at that time. Not even the rom.
Just the drama.
Yeah.
Mine was in high school. I got dumped by a guy who was a year older, and I just thought he was like a living god. And it was, we only dated for like 2 weeks. I was such a hormonal teenage girl. Like anything that didn't go perfectly was just total devastation. So, 2 weeks in, he dumps me. I then spent the next 6 months like pining over it. I remember like driving past his house in the middle of the night, seeing if his car was there.
Were you like Lily Taylor in, I forget what the movie was. Oh, Say Anything? She's singing about that
That'll never be me. That'll never be me. No, absolutely never. Yes, I love that character so much.
Lily Taylor, if you ever listen, we need to meet you.
We love you.
Oh my God. But
yeah.
And what's interesting is that I can't even remember that kid who went through that. Like, I'm so not that person anymore.
I know, right? Well, we really learn who we are through our relationships, and we learn who we are through the end of our relationships. We've both been through divorces. my parents divorced when I was, 10, 11, 12, and then I had my own divorce about, 9 years ago. You learn a lot about yourself in the process.
Yeah, I think that when I got divorced the first time, I had no idea how to deal with the emotions. Mm-hmm. I became very depressed.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't eat.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty robust. I'm a large person. I'm not fat. Whatever. I'm not obese.
You're a hardy man.
I'm a big person, but I'm 6'3". I'll leave it at that. But my point is I weighed not a lot. And I had a secretary who would leave brownies on my desk because she was afraid I wasn't
worried
eating.
About you.
Yeah, when I showed up to work.
Oh,
that was a whole lot. It was just bad. It was bad all around.
Well, we go through a lot of really intense emotional and physical experiences when we go through heartbreak. And a piece that I think is before heartbreak for some of us, it's like the rejection of even dating, right? Even just like being out there dating different people to find a relationship. Rejection is a really big topic with the women I work with, either emotional rejection in relationships and dating or rejection at work, scrutiny, right? Feedback. Sure. You're not, we need to talk about how you're doing things at work. One of my clients said, if I could just handle rejection 25% better, that would be huge in my life. It would just be so much relief for me to not react so strongly to everything.
And my experience is that we don't realize what is great about rejection. I think that we don't realize, oh, thank God I didn't end up with this person. Yeah. Or thank God that marriage is over. I mean, from both of us, we are with the loves of our lives, right? And it's fantastic we're divorced. Could we have lived without some of the drama and expense? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we could have, or we couldn't have, right? But the reality is, though, we're so much happier. I don't want to speak for you, but I know that you're much happier.
It's true.
And so I feel like, with the dating thing, I like the idea of, and when I was dating, it was like, oh, okay, this isn't a good fit. Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Good news.
Well, a lot of the, the kind of myths or cultural, rules that we have around how to get through heartbreak kind of seem to be along the lines of just take it day by day and eventually you'll get over it, right? Mm-hmm. Which doesn't really help.
Okay, so you're saying just feel miserable until I stop feeling miserable.
Until you stop, yes. So this new book that I'm going to be interviewing the author, Guy Winch, it's called How to Fix a Broken Heart. And he's been a therapist for many, many years. And he really focuses on helping people get through heartbreak and practicing emotional first aid. He's got some really great ideas.
I love that phrase, emotional first aid.
Yeah, it's really good. You should listen to the show.
Well, let's do that.
Dr. Guy Winch, thanks for being here on Her Rules Radio today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So your new book, How to Fix a Broken Heart, which was a runaway sensation as a TED Talk, it seems like there aren't many books like this. I haven't seen a book about how to heal heartbreak.
I know. I hadn't either. When I was approached by TED to write it, I was convinced that, somebody must have already looked at the new science and the neuroscience and written it up in a way that would be helpful to people. But when I did some investigating, I found that wasn't the case. And so it was surprising to me. This is so common and it's so painful and it's so debilitating. And we do have new science about it. Why hasn't that been distilled for public consumption? And so it hadn't been, but I was glad that I had the opportunity to do that.
And when did you start to connect the dots that this was a topic worthy of diving into the research? Were you seeing this a lot as a practitioner?
So as a private practitioner, I've had a practice for over 25 years. Whenever people would get heartbroken, and when you work with people enough, that would often happen, it always stood out that the extent of the emotional pain that they felt, the impairment in their functioning that they went through was so severe, was so significant. And it didn't matter how old you were, it didn't matter your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your culture. It was terrible for all. And yet all people said almost the same thing, like, well, there's not even point in bringing it up in therapy, because what can you do? The only thing that really helps is time and maybe social support, and I can get that from friends, so what's the point of even talking about it? And there is so much point, because those two ingredients, time and social support, are important ingredients. But they're two of many other ingredients we could be using and should be using to recover.
So we'll talk about the different ingredients in a moment, but something that really struck me in your introduction was that we tend to think, and I found myself realizing, oh yeah, I guess I had that assumption as well. We tend to think of heartbreak as something that really only happens to the young, when we're naive and inexperienced, but that's not true.
It's completely untrue. I mean, we tend to think of it as happening to the young because they're usually not in long-term relationships. So they're the ones who are getting their heart broken most, because they're at those initial stages. And as you get older, you're more likely to be in a long-term relationship, or for a while then drop out of one. But it affects us regardless of age. And it is truly, the oldest person I worked with who was heartbroken was close to 90. And they said, wow, I haven't felt this way since I was 16. And they didn't mean it in a good way. I mean, literally they were comparing it to the pain they felt at 16.
Oh my gosh. So let's talk about that. This is something that I have not heard many people talk about, except in terms of past trauma and how the body kind of holds on to emotional trauma. But why is heartbreak such a physical process? You know, I've experienced myself. I know every listener can relate. Heartbreak can cause such physical pain. Why is that? Is there an evolutionary benefit for heartbreak feeling physically painful?
Actually, there is. The thing is, when we look at studies, what we see is that studies that did brain scans looked at people who were in emotional pain because they were heartbroken and compared what their brain looks like when they're heartbroken, specifically when they're lying in a brain scan tube, looking at the picture of the person who broke their heart while reliving the breakup. And then they took the same people and they put heat inducers on their forearms and cranked up the heat. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 was mild discomfort and 10 was unbearable pain. They cranked it up to 8. And it was only once it reached 8 that the brain started to look very similar to what it looks like when our heart is broken. So we're experiencing something that's almost like near unbearable pain, except in those experiments that the pain setting was on for 7 seconds. When our heart is broken, it's broken and the pain we feel goes on for much longer than 7 seconds, for hours and days, weeks and months. Now, what we know in terms of evolution is that rejection itself has an evolutionary benefit for it being a painful thing, that component of the rejection. And because when we were hunter-gatherers and living in tribes, to be excluded from the tribe was a death sentence. And so earlier on, when people were rejected, as an early warning sign to being ostracized, those who experienced the rejection as more painful, paid more attention to it and corrected their behavior, made it more likely for them to then stay in the tribe and pass along their genes. And those who experienced rejection as less painful, less so. And over time, rejection became this very, very hardwired, painful thing. So rejection hurts fundamentally. But then add on that the pain that we typically experience when we experience grief and loss, and that really supersizes it.
It does. I like how you mentioned supersize. Now, we tend to think, as you mentioned, you'd have patients come in and say, well, I just need time, right? I'm not going to talk about it with you. You know, there are actual methods that you've talked about in your book, How to Fix a Broken Heart. There's ways that we can think, and there's ways that we can act to heal our heartbreak, to facilitate that. So what are a couple of the top ways that we can think and ways that we can act to help accelerate this recovery?
So I have to preface that by explaining something kind of important. And that is that when our heart is broken, our mind has a very different agenda than we do. Because our agenda, if say it's romantic heartbreak, is to get over it so we can find love again. That's our ultimate goal, make the pain stop. But ultimately, get over it so we can go out and find love again. The problem is, we did not evolve to find happiness. We evolved, our mind evolved to keep us safe. The imperative was safety, not happiness. And safety means that when our mind encounters something that's painful, it wants us to remember it so we don't do that thing again. If you think of touching a hot stove as a child, it really hurts. And then every time you get near the stove, you start to feel anxious. Your mind will remind you when you see the stove of how painful it is. And those reminders are important because our mind needs us to recognize that don't touch that again. That was a bad thing to do. Now, our mind is doing the same thing when we're heartbroken. It wants us to remember the pain. It wants to keep the pain sharp so we remember and never do that thing again that caused us so much pain. Except we want to be able to do that thing again because that thing again came about from falling in love. We want to be able to do that. So our mind is going to keep the memories fresh. It's going to keep introducing images of the person into our brain. It's going to make us remember how great they were and how great the relationship is. And it's going to inflate how amazing everything was. And that is often inaccurate because our mind will keep shooting us messages and images of the smile and the romantic weekend and the lovely this and the lovely that.
Right. We remember the good parts.
Right. But there were plenty of frowns. There were plenty of horrific weekends. There were plenty of times we sat there and thought, I'm really unhappy here. Should I stay in this relationship? Only none of those come up when our heart is broken because that's not our mind's agenda. Our mind's agenda is to keep us away from the danger of looking for love again. So we have to introduce those. So one of the techniques I talk about in the book is a balancing out technique. When your mind is feeding you idealized versions of the person, of the relationship, buying that, staying with that idealized version is just going to make everything hurt more. We need to balance it out. We can't tell ourselves, don't think that, but we can tell ourselves, well, if you're going to think that, think this too. And then you remember the frown. For every amazing snapshot you get or moment that you remember this great blissful time together, remind yourself of the really not so blissful time that also occurred in a different moment. And by balancing out these idealized versions and doing it each time we get those images, we will be processing a much more realistic loss, a much more realistic perception of who the person is, and one that's easier to get over because it was not perfect.
Okay, so we shouldn't idealize the past.
Our mind is going to make us do that. We need to balance out the idealization proclivity we have by forcing the memories of all the other stuff as well.
See, I find that really helpful to know that my brain is automatically going to try to idealize it, but it's my job to be conscious and aware and say, okay, that's my brain trying to idealize it and keep me safe from ever having heartbreak again by never getting involved with anyone. So, I find that really comforting. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not stupid. I'm not wrong.
And you know what, Alex, there's a thing that when we sustain emotional injuries in general, much of the time, and this is my work in a more general sense than just this book, much of the time, we need to do exactly that. We need to be aware of what an emotional recovery entails in this situation and how we need to take charge of our recovery and not just leave it up to our mind, because in most cases of emotional injuries, our mind is not exactly on the same team. So we need to know the right thing to do and assert it whenever we have emotional injuries.
Yeah, I indulge in a lot of self-talk like, Alex, it's okay. This is normal. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about behaviors. What are some of the behaviors that people can do? Like, I know for me, social media is not my friend when I'm going through something like this.
Social media is not your friend if you're going to use it to check up on your ex, to stalk them, to see what they're doing. And here's what happens. When someone breaks up with you, then they've been thinking about this for a while. Most people don't do it impulsively. Most people are thinking about it, debating it. They start to drift emotionally. They then tell you about that or not, often not. And then it comes to the point where they've decided, I'm ready. And then they will break up, let's say on a Monday. But you'll think back, how can they not love me on Monday when they were so affectionate on Friday? When they said they loved me last Tuesday? What happened between last Tuesday and this Monday that caused them to change their feelings? Well, the answer is nothing. The answer is they were faking it last Tuesday because they haven't decided yet. So when you haven't decided, and people who have been on both sides of a breakup know this, when you haven't decided, you don't alert the person, I'm kind of thinking of breaking up with you. I'll let you know when I decide for sure. But that's not how it works, right? And people just keep it to themselves and kind of go through the motions. But that's very confusing to the other person because they look back and they go, everything seemed fine. What happened? And then you start concoct these mysteries of, well, something must have happened. And then you go, well, I need to then stalk them on social media. Maybe that will give me the hints of they went to this place last week. Maybe something happened there. Now, again, nothing happened. And all you're doing by looking at the social media is seeing that they seem fine and seem to have moved on already. How is that possible when you're so bereft? It's possible because they've been moving on for months now, sometimes years. So they've got a way head start on you. But again, those things are very bewildering. It's very, very painful when you are in such pain to see your ex seem to, there they are at a party, there they are in the park, they seem to be doing great. How is that possible? It just makes it hurt more. So one of the behaviors we must not indulge is this looking up our ex on social media, texting them, emailing them, messaging them, going through all the vacation pictures. It is not a useful behavior.
Wow, so cold turkey, completely disengaging.
For a while, until you start to move past it, at least, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. I know a lot of people who have not followed that path. So that's interesting.
There are many people who disagree with that path, who say, well, but there's no reason we can't remain friends. And I'm like, yes, there is. You're in love with them, and they're not. So no, you can't remain friends because you need to get over being in love with them, or you need to get over the memory of the relationship causing you pain. And once you do, when you think of them, it doesn't come with an ache, then you're ready to be friends. And at that point, the vast majority of people are not interested in being friends.
So good. So there are so many kinds of heartbreak. And in this book, and honestly, I hadn't really considered that before, the differentiations. Mm-hmm. In this book, you focused on 2 different kinds. Tell us what they are and why you chose to do that.
I chose to focus on romantic heartbreak. This is what we've been discussing so far, and also on pet loss. And I did that because both of these forms of heartbreak have been shown to cause significant grief responses, ones that rival the loss of a first-degree relative for some people. And so they cause significant grief, but they're not sanctioned. I don't know anyone who goes into work saying to their boss, I won't be able to come to the staff meeting. I need a couple of days off because my cat died. And I don't know any 40 or 50 or 60-year-olds who are going into work saying, I can't work for a couple of days because my boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with me. We would really not do careers probably a service by doing that because we'd be judged for it, unfortunately. And why I say unfortunately is because we shouldn't be judged for it. Those cause significant grief responses. I've worked with people who've had their pets with them for 20 years by every major life event, had their loyalty, their companionship, that those pets, they were considered family members. They got Christmas presents, and not just from them, for the whole family. And when those pets die, it is a huge loss. And yet they constantly feel silly for crying about it. They feel, embarrassed that they're so tearful over a loss like that when it is a significant loss. And so it was very important for me to make the point that these are not silly losses. They are huge life events. They cause grief reactions that are just as profound for some people as losing a parent or a sibling. And we have to take them seriously.
Yeah, we really do. I dove into the world of positive psychology a few years back. And when I learned that humans and dogs especially release oxytocin together when they play, when you pet them, etc., when you cuddle, that's the love and bonding hormone that we release with our children, with our families. So we are biochemically bonded to our dogs for sure. Cats, I'm not so sure about, even though I am a serious cat person. So there are, as you write, you wrote about these mistakes that people make, pet owners, when their beloved pet dies. Can you walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, so a lot of the times pet owners feel a lot of guilt when their pet dies, usually unnecessarily. I say unnecessarily because animal lovers usually give their pets a wonderful life. And if you are really bereft because your pet died, you're an animal lover by definition. And people often, feel guilty because our pets can't speak up. They can't say, this stomachache is not going away, or, I'm not feeling myself. And so we don't know something is wrong with them until something is very wrong with them. And often pets can even pass away at home, and we didn't even realize, they were near that, because again, they can't verbalize it. And we can make mistakes. We can, leave the door open. We can think we are holding the leash strongly enough, but then the dog gets away. The window's open and the cat falls out or runs out. Those things can happen. They're terrible mistakes. But the issue is that we give our pets a wonderful life. And so that guilt can really hurt us because it prevents us from being able to move on. And you'll see people Like in the book, I talk about this man who months after his dog died, the dog bowls were still out. The dog's pillow where he slept during the day was still out. Like it was the reminders of the dog were everywhere. And so it just made so much more real the loss. It made so much more, tangible the thing that's, no longer there. It really complicates the grief when you do that. And it feels terrible to take these things away because it feels disloyal. It feels like, oh, the dog just died and after 20 years and I can already put their things away. You should put their things away. I'm not saying don't mourn them for sure, but put their things away because you need to symbolize to yourself that they are no longer here. And maybe the absence of the pillow, the absence of the dog bowls, or the absence of the grooming kit, the absence of whatever it is will make you feel like, I really want another animal. And if you feel that way, you should get one.
Sweet. Now, how can we stop criticizing ourselves for still feeling heartbroken, for not being over it yet? Is there a time limit on this kind of thing?
Well, look, we unfortunately criticize ourselves for feeling emotional pain, period. Because we grew up in a society that tells us that what's the paradigm of emotional strength and stoicness we see in our society, right? So it's the old action hero trope. The most horrific things happen. They kill his family. They murder everyone he cares about. And he doesn't shed a tear. He just gets even.
Batman.
And everyone. Name an action hero. It's all of them. And my point is, what do you mean you're not shedding a tear? Why can't you shed a tear and get revenge? Why can't Liam Neeson in the movie Taken? I always use this example, right? For those who haven't seen it, his daughter is on the phone where sex traffickers are about to abduct her in a foreign country. And she's on the phone with him and they're coming for her and she screams as they drag her away. I'm not using spoilers. The movie's called Taken, so you can kind of see that one coming. But, the idea is he's on the phone and then the bad guys get on the phone and Liam Neeson says to them, oh, you made the wrong move because I have a particular set of skills that mean bad news for bad guys like you. Now, it's a great line. I'm all for the line. Would it have made him any less heroic if he shed a tear as he said it? Would he have been any less brave if his lower lip trembled at the sound of his daughter's desperate screams, who we might never see again, who might be being raped in the other room right now? To me, it is something incredibly unrealistic and incredibly false about the image we put out about what emotional strength and stoicism means. It means not the management of emotion, but the absence of emotion. And that's not human. That's not a human response. So it's science fiction, all these action movies. But that's what we have in our mind, that if we're feeling something, that we must be emotionally weak and mature. There must be something wrong with us for having a strong emotional reaction. And that's across the board. Certainly, when you're feeling incredible grief because your cat died or your dog died or your horse died, or you're feeling completely bereft because somebody that you were really smitten with broke up with you, it feels like I should be able to shrug this off. And then on top of the emotional pain, on top of the loss, on top of the grief, we add this voice of self-criticism. I'm just going to give an example that everyone has done, and that is that when we get rejected, even mildly in a romantic situation, our reflex, our default response is to start to list everything that we feel inadequate about. Well, if only I was taller, if only I were richer, funnier, if only this were bigger and that was smaller and I had more of this and less of that. That's our initial response. So at the point where our self-esteem is hurting most, we savage it. It's like we join Fight Club and beat ourselves up. And it is beyond me why we keep doing this. We should recognize that we should be doing the opposite when we feel hurt. We should be reviving our self-esteem, reminding ourselves of all our wonderful qualities, not of all the least wonderful qualities. And yet it's a tendency we have to get self-critical when we're emotionally wounded from rejection, heartbreak, failure, loneliness, what have you, to really savage ourselves, to become very self-critical and make everything worse. And there is no gain we get from doing that. That is sheer net loss. It's as if, I gave this example as well, we never get a cut on our arm and decide, let me take the kitchen knife and see if I can make that bigger. It wouldn't occur to us to do that because, well, that would be stupid. Well, we do that with emotional injuries all the time.
Yeah, we do. Well, I know in the past, my girlfriends have been such cheerleaders for me going through heartbreak. But what if you are a man who doesn't have friends around you, you don't have that emotional support system outside of you. What do you do without that group of people?
So, okay, I'm going to ignore the whopping generalization there about male kind and our ability to
Thank you.
to hang in groups and to emotionally validate each other's feelings. It is generally true-ish, but certainly not always true. But look, I've seen guys who, when they're heartbroken, what they want to do is they just want to call their friends and go shoot some hoops. That will make them feel better, because in the shooting of the hoops and in the smack on the shoulder that they get after they score, there is also the hand lingers for a second longer to indicate, I know it's tough now, buddy. And that often, it can feel quite reassuring for people. In other words, the emotional validation we often seek can come non-verbally. It doesn't have to just be verbal. It doesn't just have to be processing. For some men and for some women, it's useful to talk about things, and we should. For some men and for some women, it's actually not useful to talk about things. We just kind of want to get on with it, get back to it. Let's get back to work. I will do better if I just kind of look into the future. And for some people who feel that way, they do better if they look into the future and don't process it. And for some people who don't feel that way, doing that wouldn't be useful. So we kind of have to listen to what our internal kind of preference is. If we feel it's not going to be useful for me to talk about it, it'll just make me more weepy and I don't want to be, then don't. But if you feel like I really need to unburden and I really need that sense of validation that what I'm feeling is really valid, then do. And as you said, you have good girlfriends. Not everyone does. We have to give some thought to who we're asking when we're turning to somebody for emotional validation. Because somebody might be a great listener, but if you unburden yourself for an hour about how heartbroken you are, and at the end of the hour they look at you and go, wow, bummer, it's not going to feel very satisfying. So you need somebody who can not just listen, but can actually express the empathy, express the emotional validation. And some people are much better at oohing and eyeing along the way. Again, doesn't have to be full words, just a oh and ooh. They're good, they're powerful. I'm all for them. So somebody who's emotionally expressive, that can validate your feelings, give thought to who that is and go to them.
Yeah. Beautiful. Now, you wrote a little bit about cultural differences, that cultural differences might influence how we react to heartbreak. What are some examples that you've noticed?
So in general, the differences we have in terms of our emotions are not in terms of our experience of the emotion. People from different cultures experience emotions the same and experience the same responses to situations across cultures internally. How they express that feeling can differ. The legitimacy or the freedom you have to talk about a certain emotional wound will differ sometimes according to certain cultures and certain cultures and countries and things like that. So you might be in a culture, I know people that, that you're not supposed to talk about things. You're supposed to just kind of sweep them under the rug and just get on with life. And again, that might be culturally normal, but you have to ask yourself whether it suits you personally. And there might be cultures in which, for example, our grieving rituals are different from culture to culture, right? In the Jewish faith, you sit for 7 days of mourning after somebody dies. And in other faiths, you sit for shorter periods, or you sit for a couple of days and wait for a remembrance ceremony that happens a month later. So rituals can differ, but you really just have to ask yourself, do I feel the need to be among people? Do I feel the need to talk? Do I feel the need to distract myself? Whatever it is, if that's what you're feeling the need to do, then that's what you should try and seek to do, regardless of what your cultural heritage tells you the right thing is.
You mentioned distraction, and something that a lot of the women that I work with experience is that heartbreak leads to indulgence in wine or sugar, or, maybe eating in certain ways to dull the pain. How do you handle that? If you see someone saying, this heartbreak is so hellish that I'm eating half a chocolate cake every night.
We manage emotions with substances, food, alcohol, drugs, a lot to begin with. So for people who come home from work irritable because out of stress, and they just need that, glass of wine or bottle or a piece of cheesecake or half the cheesecake. In other words, a lot of us use food and alcohol and substances to manage our emotions. They might They have side effects such as alcoholism, drug abuse, weight gain, cardiovascular disease. And there are other ways we can manage our emotions. And what I say to people is like, at least first identify the emotion that you're managing. At least say to yourself, I'm feeling blank, and therefore I feel like cheesecake, because I think it'll make me feel better. If you can articulate that to yourself, there's a bit of a speed bump in that to start. But the second thing you need to ask yourself is, I'm feeling blank, and I feel blank every day, or I'm going to be feeling blank for a while. Is cheesecake therefore the best solution? Because I can do with, binging of cheesecake for a day. I can have a few glasses of wine, for a couple of days. Not a habit I want to get into necessarily. So if it's not, maybe allow myself the cheesecake today, but figure out a more long-term and healthier solution for tomorrow.
Yes. Now, we spoke about having to talk about your grief at work, or how people don't talk about their grief at work, or taking time off. And the cost of heartbreak at work can be high. I had a client who lost both of her parents within a very short period of time, and she broke down crying in front of her boss and then felt judged, and it may have put her promotion in jeopardy. How can we balance the real process of grief and heartbreak and still make sure our careers aren't impacted?
And that's so unfortunate, because if she felt that crying because she lost both her parents in a short amount of time in any way painted her as incompetent in any way, or less competent, or less strong, or less capable, that is an absolute falsehood, albeit it's one she might believe and her boss might believe. So therein lies the problem. I did a workshop for corporate founders and CEOs last year. And one of the CEOs, founders actually of the company, said, I had to step back and bring in a CEO because I would get very emotional in meetings and tear up. And my team said to me, you can't, you need somebody else to lead this if you're going to be that emotional. And my response was, why, for goodness sakes? How did your employees feel about their founder having feelings about things? Was it really that dismissive? Or the company is doing well, right? The company was actually doing well at the time. So why? Why is that not a corporate culture you would want to instill? We actually have feelings here and we can talk about them when they're relevant. Or if we're talking about good news and something that touched us, it's okay to tear up. But that is a foreign notion for most companies. We're dealing with a reality where the world is not like I would like it to be, certainly at this point. And so we have to deal with A, how things should be, and B, with how they are. And so part of why I talk about this is because heartbreak can make you, cry for days on end. How great are you going to be at your job when you're sitting at your desk crying for days on end? In other words, if you had sharp pain because, you broke a limb and you were in sharp pain and on painkillers, no one would expect you to function well at work because, you're in pain, go home and come back when you're better. It's a double standard when it comes to psychology, and I would wager that most people would choose physical pain over emotional pain because emotional pain is so much more difficult. So we need to be realistic, and realistic means if we feel like, okay, my parents died, I just had a breakup, my dog died, and I'm going to be a mess. Go into the boss and say, when you can, or email it so that they can't see that you're distressed. I need a couple of days off for, a death in the family, and just take the time. And if you're teary when you get back to work, then tell the people around you who see it, I'm a little teary, but I'm fine. My eyes water a little bit because I'm sad, but I'm actually able to focus. If that's the case, then reassure your boss, I can focus. But I think it's important for me that if I feel teary, I allow myself to have those feelings. And you could even do a little bit of education in the process, saying, I'm fully functional. Don't be, fooled by the fact that I want to, experience the sadness I'm feeling because it's been 3 days since my mother died. And I think that's appropriate.
Yeah. And some people, like you said, want to be around people. They want to go to work. They don't necessarily want to be alone at home, grieving alone. So, this is called Her Rules Radio. And the women who come here to listen are seeking to live life by their own rules. And I love the offerings that your book puts forth. And I wonder, for women who are listening right now, who are still nursing a broken heart, what is a rule that you would perhaps offer? A way that we can treat ourselves or look at heartbreak in a new way?
So one rule that I would offer is that if you found one, you can find another. And it might have been difficult to find that one, and it might have taken time. But if you could fall in love once and have somebody fall in love with you, you can do it again. And if you remember how great that felt at the beginning, I know how bad it feels now, but if you can remember how great it felt at the beginning, try and use that to motivate yourself to take charge, to say, all right, I am not just going to sit in my misery and let my mind, screw me up by trying to remind me how amazing that person was when they were great, but not amazing. I'm going to take charge and do what I need to do to move past this as quickly as I can, because I deserve to find it again. If you can assert to yourself, I need to get better, I will get better, I'm going to make myself get better, and I'm going to make myself get back out there, just like an athlete. I know many Olympic athletes who've sustained injuries, and they had to I need to start from scratch to rehab this muscle, the joint, the limb, whatever it is, and so I can get back out there and win medals again. They're not saying just so I can walk, so I can get back out and compete. Same mindset. Get yourself better so you can get back out and compete. And don't take no for an answer. And don't take prisoners. And don't allow fear and pain to make you think that it'll never happen again to you, or you don't deserve it, or it'll be too difficult. It'll be difficult, but you can do it, and you should do it, and you do deserve it.
Great. Dr. Guy Winch, thank you so much. Your book, How to Fix a Broken Heart, out as a partnership with TED Books, and it's a wonderful read. I highly recommend it. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for being here, rulers. Great to have you back. Please go on over to herrulesradio.com/shop and check out our amazing sponsors, including Julva, my favorite non-toxic skincare from Beauty Counter. And don't forget my brand new book out with my husband, Bob Gower, Getting to Hell Yes, about the conversation that will change your business and the rest of your life, is out now. You can go to gettingtohellyes.com and download the book for free, or hop on over to Amazon and download the book for 99 cents down to your little Amazon Kindleberry. All right, my darling. See you here next week. Mwah. So excited that you're going to be back here with me for this brand new season of Her Rules Radio. Now, I wanted to make sure that you knew about two very cool things happening. First, my husband, Bob Gower, and I wrote a new book called Getting to Hell Yes, which is a conversation that will change your life. It's something that we use in our businesses and in our family all the time. So you can get it for free at gettingtohellyes.com, or you can download it for 99 cents in the Kindle store on Amazon. Lastly, I have a brand new way for you to help support the amazing sponsors of this show and get some very cool things in your life. You can go to herrulesradio.com/shop and find all of the wonderful makers and products that I use in my life that I have enjoyed making partnerships with. So go check out herrulesradio.com/shop, and we'll see you soon on the next episode.